Thanks also for the museum team, which consists of so many volunteers who are dedicated to the Palestinian cause and culture, of course. You know, in this presentation, I'll be talking about relatively a new vision, a new proposal, and there's a new campaign also that goes with all of that. So a new approach, a new vision, new proposal, and a new campaign, you know, wrapped in one thing. So the approach is, when we are talking about the approach, we are talking about what I call the divide and share approach. When we talk about the proposal, we are talking about two states, two independent states, Palestine and Israel, but one homeland, two states and one country, one homeland, two states sharing all the things that cannot or should not be divided, and I'll talk more about that. So it's a vision for peace, just peace, end of the conflict, final with, you know, reconciliation between the two Israelis, Jews on the one hand, and the Palestinians, all the Palestinians on the other hand. When you talk about Palestinians, that includes also the Palestinian refugees or Palestinians living outside the boundaries of historic Palestine or mandatory Palestine. Do you hear me easily? Okay, I want to make sure. Campaign that, you know, try to propagate and spread these ideas. This campaign is led by a joint team, Israeli Jews on the one hand and Palestinians on the other. It has been active for 3-4 years, but probably they should do more in order to spread the message. So now back to the proposal. The title of my presentation is a non-modest proposal for resolving the conflict between Israelis, Jews, and Palestinians. You know, the modest proposal has this association in your minds as British. That goes back to the 18th century, Jonathan Swift. But I do not have this ironic implication of, in my, I mean, non-modest, I mean it literally, not ironically. You know, in order to reach this kind of peace that we are looking for, the desirable peace, the final peace, the peace with reconciliation, this kind of peace is predicated on respect for a variety of principles. So these are the fixed points that we should deal with, the principles, the pillars, the main items. And I will list them and see how we can find that proposal which takes care of each of them. First, of course, we are talking about the creation of an independent and viable Palestinian state alongside Israel, to the east of Israel and in peace with Israel, and adjustment to the borders of June 4th, 1967, should not in any way disfavor the Palestinian state. And the second principle is Israel remaining a democratic and Jewish state, but a Jewish state only in the sense that the majority of its actual citizens are Jews. Because when you talk about a Jewish state in the normative sense, it has so many implications. But I'm ready to accept, and we are talking about a Jewish state only in the sense that the majority of the citizens are Jewish. The third principle is the free return of the Palestinian refugees or those who wish to exercise their right of return to their homeland, mainly but not exclusively to the Palestinian state. This is in addition to securing citizenship for the Palestinian refugees in their other places of residence. You know, each Palestinian should have a citizenship, mainly, not exclusively in the Palestinian state, but also in the Israeli state, but even elsewhere. I mean, we should put an end to this refugee status of Palestinians anywhere. And the fourth item is respect for the attachments of both Palestinian and Israeli Jews to the whole country or to special parts of it. And the fifth, equal democratic citizenship for both Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews within the boundaries of either of the two states. And the following one, compensation for the loss of homes and private property and related suffering of the Palestinian refugees and the internally displaced Palestinian persons. So these are the principles. Now, you know, with these principles in mind, we are in a good position, or in a better position, I believe, to appraise the merits of the different and competing options or proposals for peacefully resolving the century-old conflict between Palestinians and Israeli Jews, taking into account, of course, that the continuation of the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank, the status quo, any apartheid regime, or any agreed upon or unilaterally imposed transitional stage is not tenable for the long run. So we end up with limited number of options. First, there are those who argue for the one-state solution. Probably some of you are in favor of that. I'll be critical of that position. With or without federation or binationalism, the one-state solution is not a live political option for the short and immediate term. Though the majority of Palestinians inside and outside the occupied territories since '67 might be in favor of such a solution, the overwhelming majority of Israeli Jews are strongly opposed to it, as it conflicts with their commitment to keep Israel as a democratic and Jewish state with a majority of Jews as its actual citizens. For the majority of Israeli Jews, the one-state solution means no less than the end of Zionism. It is this ominous nightmare of the one-state solution that lurks behind, that accounts for the declared commitment of the main political parties and movements of Jewish Israel to one version or another of the two-state solution. I am aware, as you are, of the variety of initiatives and arguments for the one-state solution, mainly advocated by Palestinian intellectuals, non-Zionist Israeli and non-Zionist Israeli Jews and others. And it is not my intention here to enumerate these initiatives, old and new, or to evaluate the arguments for and against each of them. As a committed liberal Democrat, my heart and mind are clearly in favor of some version of the one-state solution, primarily because it is the most accommodative to the needs and aspirations of the Palestinian refugees. This is of course, in addition to its other manifest merits. But as I said before, the one-state solution heralds the end of Zionism as the majority of Israeli Jews understand it. You know, those who are opposed to the Israeli Jews, their political representatives and supporters, you know, they are against the one-state solution. And this accounts for its rejection, for the rejection of the one-state solution by them. In any case, the one-state solution is not right around the corner, nor will it be for the foreseeable future. The most we can do in this regard is not to block the road leading to it by creating insurmountable barriers. So this is put aside. Now to the two-state solution, so the most popular. So call it what you want. Call it the Geneva Initiative, or the Clinton parameters, or the Saudi or Arab peace plan, or the Bush vision. Now call it what you want. Or the vision that resulted from a major decision by resolution by the Security Council. The two-state solution, as we all know, encounters formidable obstacles. Endless rounds of negotiation between the Israelis and Palestinians, direct and indirect, in the country and abroad, and for more than a generation, have not yielded any significant results so far. The majority of both Israeli Jews and Palestinians, as well as the international community at large, are supportive of some version or another of the two-state solution. But the facts on the ground created by the successive Israeli governments over the years, mainly in terms of settlement activity, the erection of the separation wall, and the creation of a new Jewish neighborhood in Arab Jerusalem, made the establishment of a viable Palestinian state along the June 4th, 1967 borders an almost impossible task. It is therefore no accident that with the passage of time, the species of skeptics, Palestinians and others, about the viability of the two-state solution is only growing in number. It does not follow, however, that the idea of the two-state solution should be abandoned. Rather, it is my settled view that this idea needs to be revisited and significantly revised. The two-state solution is not, so now it's our vision, proposal, approach, campaign, call it what you want. Since neither the one-state solution nor the two-state solution, according to the currently defended or endorsed version, is right around the corners, so we have been looking for alternatives. Politicians, intellectuals, academicians, they started to search for alternative solutions, final or otherwise. And there are so many proposals that I'm not going to mention or list them. But I think it's very important, and I still believe that a revised version, significantly revised version of the two-state solution can accommodate the competing demands and claims of the two parties to the conflict, taking into account, of course, the big changes on the ground, especially in the West Bank, including Arab or East Jerusalem. The guiding idea in the following revised two-states proposal dawned on me toward the end of the first month of the Al-Aqsa Intifada. So I've been thinking along this line, since the end of October, the year 2000. So, and I expressed these ideas in, here and there, but now you have almost the full account of that. So the components or constituent elements of this revised version of the two-state solution can be listed as follows. And I think this is a few. Listen with special attention to the proposal now. First, the creation of a democratic Palestinian state along the June 4th, 67 borders with minor adjustments in favor of the Palestinian state, not in favor of it. Second, recognizing Israel as a democratic and Jewish state, Jewish only in the sense that the majority of its actual citizens are Jews. Third, settlers who find themselves within Palestinian jurisdiction can become either equal Palestinian citizens or remain Israeli citizens with permanent resident status in Palestine, of course without their current privileges. Fourth, Palestinian refugees can freely return to the Palestinian state. Those refugees who opt to return to Israel can become permanent resident Israel, but citizens of Palestine. Those Palestinians who opt to remain citizens of other states can still exercise their right of return to the Palestinian states whenever they wish. Arrangements for dual citizenship should also be put in place. In any case, no Palestinian should be allowed to remain a stated person hereafter. Next, the two states commit themselves to the values and practices of liberal democracy, as well as to the principle of non-discrimination against ethnocultural minority groups. Next, separation between the two states is to be mainly political rather than geographic or demographic. No monstrous walls or repulsive fences are to separate between the two states. Thus, the unity of the one country could be preserved. Next, the two states are fairly to share all the things that cannot or should not be divided. Above all, they are fairly to share the city of Jerusalem, which should remain united and open to all. Next, far-reaching cooperation and integration between the two democratic neighboring states. Are you following? Not easy. Next, agreed upon schemes of special minority rights for both Palestinians in Israel and Jews in Palestine. Such special minority rights are primarily intended to protect and sustain their respective ethnocultural particularity. Next, important for you, respect for the attachment of both Palestinian and Israeli Jews to the whole country or to special parts of or places in it. The attachment of non-Palestinian Arabs, Muslims, and Christians, as well as those of non-Israeli Jews, should also be taken into account seriously. The above revised two-state proposal rests on two important distinctions. The first distinction is between country and state. The other is between citizenship and residency status. Accordingly, though I might end up as a citizen of either state, the whole country will be mine as my attachment to it is being respected. In the other state, I'm much more than a tourist or passerby. I can work, move freely, reside, own property, and above all, I can be a permanent resident enjoying equal civil rights. Thus, Israel can remain a Jewish and democratic state, while Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews can enjoy the whole country. Needless to say, under more conducive conditions, especially with citizenship nationalism rather than ethnocultural nationalism prevails, the two countries can entertain confederation or even federation. To conclude, the one-state solution, attractive as it is from the perspective of committed liberal Democrats, is not a viable political option for resolving the Palestine-Israel conflict in the foreseeable future. This is mainly because the overwhelming majority of Israeli Jews are still committed to Zionism. It does not help much to say or threaten that the failure of the currently advocated and defended, endorsed two-state solution would or should give added impetus to the one-state solution. If the two solution fails, it does not follow that the one solution is the only option. Far from it. The failure of the currently endorsed two-state solution might entail the continuation of occupation or its replacement by some sort of an apartheid system or rule, or it might be replaced by unilaterally imposed Israeli interim arrangements, such as the unilateral withdrawal of Israeli forces from some areas, areas B, as you, or even parts of area C. So they withdraw, this is for Palestinian, this is for us. So this is one option. It is my considered judgment that what is most needed now is a revised vision for the two-state solution that takes seriously into account what Israel has created as facts on the ground, while turning these facts against their malicious creators. The revised two-state solution that I propose is intended to do just that. But more importantly, it directly addresses almost all the most core issues. It is with such an attractive, inclusive vision, I think, that we should approach both the Israeli public opinion and the international community, including the UN system. Needless to say, in closing, that I personally tend to believe that such a revised two-state proposal is not only academically or intellectually appealing, but also, and more importantly, politically practicable in spite of your initial impressions to the contrary. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Thanks for your interesting talk. The thing about the two-state solution is the way things are, on the facts on the ground, is that Israel is maliciously creating a situation where if you have the West Bank and Gaza infrastructurally, there's virtually nothing left of the Palestinians. So how are you going to reverse that? In terms of a two-state solution, as opposed, I mean, it may sound radical talking about a one-state solution, but with the situation of the way things are with the settlements, etc., highways, all kinds of other things, how is a two-state solution feasible? Thank you.
It seems to me that the stumbling block for anything is the USA and the government and their sort of support and continued support for Israel and sort of settler expansionism. What sort of steps are being taken to improve lobbying in the USA to sort of field the idea of a two-state solution? Because unless we get sort of more voices in America on board, I just can't see, you know, the current regime sort of entertain any idea of that, and it would be great to sort of get something, you know, up and running in America to try and increase the voice to create the two-state solution. Thanks.
You know, the question, back to your question first, we know what Israel is doing, whether when it comes to Gaza or the West Bank, particularly in Jerusalem. But the question really, how to present an attractive vision, something that takes into account all the major concerns of the parties. Okay, the situation is so bad, this fascist, rightist government, you know, with this annexations, with this, with the wall, with these settlements activities, with siege of Gaza, with the, you know, separation, creating, you know, Palestinian Bantustans, you know, here and there. So that makes it impossible for a Palestinian state to emerge. This is what you are saying. I mean, we know how bad the situation is. And we know that all efforts to create a real Palestinian state have failed. But I think that what I'm saying is that the very concept of the two-state solution, or let's call it, and I've been attracted to call it the classic two-state solution. Forget about the practices of the Israeli government. What does the classic
Sorry, can't hear. Sorry.
classic two-state solution, you know, Palestinian states roughly along the 1967 borders with roughly East Jerusalem or parts of East Jerusalem as its capital, and, you know, very limited return of the refugees. I think that is, you know, it was doomed to fail because it does not have the solution to the core problems here. And the core problem being the refugee issue is, you know, is very central. And the two-state solution, I think the premise was that this is not the major issue. But as I said, you know, this idea of the two-state solution, sharing the one land, dawned on me by the end of October in the year 2000. You know, with the Al-Aqsa Intifada, the year 2000, it was so evident that the issue of the refugees should take a central stage. And the question, if the return of the refugees is a basic Palestinian demand, and you know, Israeli Jews say, we want a Palestinian, we want an Israeli state with a Jewish majority as its citizen, right? But with the return of the refugees and the Palestinians in the area of historic Palestine, Israel cannot remain a Jewish state in the sense that it wants. So I want to find a way, an attractive way to say Palestinian refugees can return, and that can be consistent with Israel remaining a Jewish state, a Jewish also only in the sense that the majority of its citizens are Jews. So there is a way of it. And so the issue of the refugees is so basic. It cannot be avoided. It cannot be brushed aside. You know, the Oslo agreements, this is something for the multilateral negotiations, like the water issues. It's not. It is the main issue. And you should think about a solution that has, you know, that takes that into account. And the same can be said also about the settlement. Okay, settlement, I mean, you have it here, you have it everywhere. Of course they are illegal, all of them. The neighborhoods in Jerusalem are illegal, and the other settlements, the blocks of settlement, the isolated, all of them are illegal. But the question is what to do, given no Israeli government can evacuate, you know, this number. We are talking about settlements in Jerusalem, including East Jerusalem. We are talking about 700,000. No Israeli government can do it. And the international community will not pressure Israel to do it, given the U.S. you know, commitment, even this Trump administration and the ambassador, American ambassador, saying that stop talking about the settlements as illegal. You know. But I have a, you know, with our initiative, we have a solution, of course. We say to the settlers, okay, those of you who want to remain under Palestinian sovereignty, okay, you can stay without privilege. We treat you, we cannot accept a Palestinian state that has no, you know, forget about the Mediterranean. So that's not going to. I think these attachments are important. The refugee problem is the settlements in Jerusalem. So I think we should present something, a plan, blueprint, a vision that takes, you know, that can handle fairly all of these issues. So here, this is a proposal. Think about it. I think we can, when you talk to Israeli Jews, to moderate, to leftists, I think they are ready to discuss this issue. And you know, of course, Palestinians are more in favor. More Palestinians in favor than Israelis at this point. But I think this is a promising initiative, I think. It's more promising than the one-state solution. You know, the one-state solution is my dream. This is what I want. This is what, you know, this is, eventually, this is but it might take 100 years. So that's, so I do not want to block the way to that dream. But we want to do politics, not dream work. So we can interpret dreams in many ways, but I think if you want political action, we are talking about today and tomorrow and next 5 years or 10 years, not about the end of time.
The level of US support for, you know, the current administration in Israel, and the fact that it would be great to have a greater voice, a lobbying force in America to promote the two-state solution, and if you can provide any information about that or the path to it, that would be great.
You know, the US has been no less of a problem than Israel, you know, since the beginning, since '48. I mean, the Americans are And we should take that that they are committed to the security, to the prosperity of Israel, with the Trump administration more than ever before. In spite all efforts by Arabs and by Palestinians, by the international community. I mean, the U.S. is going all the way. So I think with this kind of vision, you can approach the public opinion in the U.S. Even you can approach the American jury, which is divided these days, more than ever before, with this rightist, fascist government, coalition government in Israel, which is alienating so many Jews in the U.S., alienating them for religious reasons, because to be a Jew, you have to comply with what the establishment in Israel is doing. So the reformists are not recognized as Jews. You have now more than 400,000 Israeli citizens who claim they are Jews, but not recognized by the Israeli Jewish establishment as such. So in their passports and their identity card, they are not recognized as Jews. But they are full Israeli citizens and serve in the army and so forth. So I think the same, alienation of so many American Jews who are reformists do not go along the lines of the Jewish establishment. But more importantly, there's political alienation also. This rightist government is taking the Jews to the right, and the American Jewry is not. I mean, historically, they have been more with the liberal democratic party supportive of, such supported the blacks in the 60s and, the welfare state and after and so forth. So there are divisions within American Jewries. And Palestinians are making the effort. They should do more, really, in order to, present their cause to those moderate American Jews who are not supported with them. But the problem really is more Christians, evangelists are supportive of Israel than American Jews these days, and that's a big challenge. George Bush, the son, came from that tradition. And Trump, really, the businessman, is also supported by these Christian Jews mainly, in addition to his, financial aspiration, ambitions. He wants to collect money from the Arabs, but he's dedicated to Israel, and Israel is part of his scheme. That. So I think we should do more in the U.S. But unfortunately, the Arab states are not doing the minimum these days because they are, busy with their internal problems. And the Americans know that. You are aware what the BDS is doing, its part. But I think in addition to the BDS, we should present a vision, we should present a proposal that can be attractive to them. And I think this is the important. This campaign is led by by Israeli Jews. You may have heard of Miron Rapoport, he's a journalist, good journalist for decades, and he's leading that on the part of the Jewish. I'm not an active part of the campaign, I have the ideas, but there's a big organization now. If you check the website, it's 2 states, 1 homeland. It's both in Arabic, Hebrew, and English. They finalized the booklet last week, I think. So, and
they visit Europe and the US, and they are starting to activate these ideas. My contribution is mainly on the level of ideas, but when it comes to activism, I mean, we have a dedicated group led by Aoun al-Mashni from the Palestinian side and Yaron Rapoport from the Israeli side. And I think this is a promising plan, proposal, vision, campaign. Call it what you want.
Thank you for coming to talk to us. Your ideas are interesting. One of the things I wanted to ask, obviously these are ideas, so to get into detail is not helpful at the moment, but I had a thought. What are your ideas as regards, now the state of Israel as it is at the moment has a national service which mans the Israeli Defense Force. Do you have any ideas as regards, if we manage to get this two-state solution with a one actual country, would you therefore be thinking of making a national service on the Palestinian side, or making a mixed defense force, or separating that and having one Israeli, one Palestinian force? Because of course there isn't a Palestinian national force at the moment. And I'm well aware from being there that the Palestinian police have jurisdiction in the various areas, but the moment the Israeli Defense Force appear, their jurisdiction ends. So obviously that would need to have some ideas about that. What are your ideas about that? David?
Idea is very interesting. I've been doing some work with others the last few years around a bigger context that might add to what you're saying, which is the context of deep ecology, which is a global phenomenon. It's not peculiar to the Middle East. So simplistically, the idea is that we do not own the land, but the land owns us. So we are part of Earth systems. I'm wondering if those concepts could be useful as a sort of philosophical underpinning of what, when you talk about attachment, philosophically that can underpin this notion of belonging to the land. So there's something greater entity than the normal legal sense of this parcel of land is mine, which extends to the ideology of nationalism and nation states. There's another paradigm that's useful, I think, in this discussion.
You know, with this proposal, we are talking about two independent states. So there is independent Israel and there is independent Palestine, each with its own army, each with its own legal system, each with its own police force, and even borders, porous, so porous. So, but of course, if we are talking about two states sharing so many things, sharing Jerusalem and sharing probably airports, seaports, resort areas, holy places, you know, there are so many things that, of course, it's not easy to divide water, you know, from the aquifer that comes from the mountains, goes to Gaza. The Israelis stops that on the way. I mean, you know that. So how to share? Well, we can share so many things. And it's not only what we can share, it's also what we should share. There are things that we cannot divide. There are things that we should not divide. Two independent entities, each with its own army, own political system, institutions. But of course, if these two states are going to share all of these things, and if we are talking about hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who return to Israel and reside in Israel as Palestinian citizens. And so you need to create all sorts of coordination and cooperation mechanisms between the two states. So you can think about some sort of a confederation, which is a relationship between two states. But I opted not to mention that because it can be less and more. Depends on what kind of cooperation, what kind of coordination or mechanism you need. That has to be decided by the parties when they establish this kind of coordination. I'm talking about on the level of principles. When it comes to implementations, of course, I mean, if you commit a crime in this place, how to deal with that? If you need all sorts of negotiations for and creation of coordination, cooperation mechanism. Do we need one currency or two? I mean, these are things to be discussed. But on the level of principle, we are talking about two states sharing a country, sharing this much, and establishing the mechanism, the coordination mechanism, the cooperation mechanism that is, that helps in that regard. Now back to your, I think this is one of my discoveries. The whole issue of attachment here is, I think it's so central. I mean, your attachment to this space, to this place, to this land, to this, to all of it. It has for some people it has religious, historical, national, it's human. I come from that place. It's very important. Even in the Galilee, I mean, when you talk, they are attached to Jerusalem. They are attached to the sea. They are attached to every. So the land is so central. So you have land, citizenship, and vision. And any divorce between them really is going to be nasty. If you meet people in the West Bank, they want the sea. They want to go to the sea. And Jaffa is our, the city, the bride. Jaffa is the city. And you want to be there and to, you are attached. But you can separate. I mean, you are a citizen of, but you can be there. You can reside there. You can work there. You can visit there. Respect for this attachment. I mean, you can go to the old city for these religious places. You can pray. You can visit. You can freely, which is very important. And for some people, it has historical, cultural, And all of these elements, I think it's very important. I mean, for a Palestinian now, for Alisar, she's British now. She enjoys all the benefits of what the welfare states, though under attack in Britain, can offer. If it is possible for her, will she decide to continue to live in Britain or to be there? People can make all sorts of decisions when it comes to where to settle, where to be citizens of. But one thing is I can be sure of, really, that, that Jaouni is living in her heart, has a special place in her heart. This is how we got to know each other. She is from Jaouni, from that village.
And it's so important for her family, and for, you know, it's part of being Palestinian, the place. Though she was born after, she never visited the place, you know, but it lives in her imagination. That should be respected. You know, Jews say that we dreamed about return to the Holy Land. After 2,000 years, still, they talk about attachment. Nobody, you know, I studied that. Nobody prevented them from returning. Nobody. During the 400 years of Ottoman Empire here, nobody prevented them. They used to live in Lebanon, in Syria, in Egypt. They never came to Palestine. So they came to Palestine because what you mentioned of nationalism. And I think that not because of religion, because of nationalism. And even when you talk about the Zionist movement in the late 19th century, early 20th century, I mean, it's the nationalists, the secular nationalists who were in the leadership. The religious establishment was not enthusiastic about the whole project. And some of them were against the whole project. But then, I do not want to expand talking about Jewish history now, or the history of Zionism. I mean, even European Jews were not enthusiastic about coming to Israel. You know, when Israel was created after the Holocaust, you know, European Jewry, they wanted the US, not to Israel. So 1948, they ended up with 600. After 50 years of active Zionism, they had only 600. And the worries of Ben Gurion and comrades really what to do. It's not enough. You know, the Jews of Europe are not coming. They are going to Britain. You know, Britain is closing the doors. They are going to the US, but not to Israel, in spite of the Holocaust. Then the decision was of Ben Gurion and comrades was we should do what needs to be done in order to bring the Jews of Iraq and, you know, the Sephardi Jew. They were not on their agenda in the beginning, but with the number of Jews, you know, less than enough to maintain a real state. So they opted for it, and they created all sorts of conditions in order to attract, in order to bring Jews even from Yemen. This was their nightmare. So I think the nationalism is one thing, religion is another, and land is, we should see how to. But the whole notion of attachment that I'm, you know, saying, I think takes care of all three elements at the same time.
Starting to hear you.
But giving, you know, the land primacy over the nationalism, that respect. Did I answer your question?
I got a lot from your answer.
Okay, got two.
Slow to understand things, and I apologise if I haven't grasped what you're saying. It's certainly very elegant, a lot of it, but I wonder if you could clarify some other numbers for me, because it seems to me if the refugees were able to come back from Jordan, from Syria, from Lebanon, you might end up with 8, 9, 10 million Palestinians living in the country. I think if there was any kind of resolution, some of the Jews would emigrate, they'd go back to other places. So you might end up with only 5 million Jews in the country.
Well,
Sorry?
you might end up
with only 5 million Jews. If some of them, I mean, I think I'm right that net Israel is currently losing Jewish population rather than gaining. So, if you're envisaging that the Israeli state will still have control of 78% of the country and the Palestinian state will have control of 22%, and if there were 10 million Palestinians living in the country and 5 million Jews, are you envisaging that the 10 million Palestinians will basically be living in the will be crammed into the Palestinian state, or are you envisaging that they would be allowed to spread out? I'm just thinking of the practicalities, and if I've got the wrong end of the stick, I apologise. But
yeah, so thank you. Very interesting ideas, and not ones I've come across before, so very enlightening as well. Because to my mind, the sort of two-state dogma has been there almost to be kicking the ball down the can, get down the road and prevaricating so that no solution ever happens, you know, because it's so impossible. But off the back of what you've said, coming from the standpoint of thinking of, I've heard what the advantages of this sort of third way idea are. However, I can also think of some stumbling blocks. First way, whatever compromise way, or some different from the sort of dogmatic two states that the UN and US and so on talk about. So that's helpful. But off the back of that, I wonder if you thought about these possible stumbling blocks. You mentioned Israel should be allowed, part of the solution should be that Israel, because they're sort of, for want of a better word, obsessed with a Jewish majority in their land, which is Zionism. How does one legislate for that? I mean, if you say that also Palestinians are allowed to live on the Israeli side, which, as we've heard from Hugh, will be 78% of the territory, as we know, Palestinians
passed on July 19th, 2018, say that, only the Jews have, self-determination in that state. Only the Jews. The 1.5 million Palestinians, are out. The principle of self-determination does not apply to them. And of course, it's a state closed, refugees cannot come in. Even family reunification is becoming much more difficult to accept than before. In addition to priority, it's open to all Jews in the whole world. And we can elaborate on that. So I think that the one state is my dream, our shared dream. But so what I'm arguing for really is a midway between the two-state, the classic two-state solution, which is doomed to failure and which failed, and the one-state solution that we dream about, both of us. So you want something on the way to that. Probably in 50 years, we get to that destination. But something on the way, the two states for two people, we create conditions also. Under favorable condition, it's very clear, under favorable condition, the movement will be to the one-state solution. But this is not a necessary condition. Yeah, it's like in science. You have in scientific theory, you want a theory that is elegant, that is simple, but sometimes you have to work with other theories on this until you get to that one. So the one state is the simple, the elegant, the natural, the human, the democratic solution. But you have all the problems that stand in the way. So you have to proceed in that direction. And the two states sharing the land and sharing all the things that should not be divided the way I described, I think puts us so close to the one-state solution. But it can, the process can be reversed also. It depends on development in the way.
Are not given, no. It depends what you do with numbers. So there are real numbers and there are fictitious numbers. So what we know is that there are 6.5 million Jews now in Israel, and an equivalent number of Palestinians. But Israel has this law of return, so the Jews might come from France, from other parts of the world, and we can think of the 13th tribe, the one mentioned by Kistler. Have you read about that? So now they are in search in India for some Jews. So I think they have a potential pool, whether in the US or whether elsewhere. But the number of Palestinians is, limited. But again, who is a Palestinian in this regard? I mean, we have to agree on that. Are the Palestinians in Chile, for instance, who left Palestine in the 19th century or early 20th, are Palestinians for this kind of purpose? I don't know. But if we are talking about the Palestinians who are living in Palestine or those refugees who were, we are talking about 11 million in total. So now you have 6 million, half of them, more than half of them inside. It's complicated. There are Palestinians who are Jordanian citizens and proud to be Jordanian citizens. And they are almost a majority in Jordan. So they are not going to give up their Jordanian citizenship in order to move to Palestine. They moved to Jordan before, voluntarily. So I think we have to think of mainly of the stateless refugees, whether in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, and inside the occupied territories, and other Palestinians who might decide to return because of their attachment, because of history, because of religion, because of nationalism, all that. But I think we can manage numbers. We can manage. It's manageable. If you take into consideration the distinction that I made between citizen of and resident in. So even if you have, let's say, 3 million of Palestinians who return to Palestine, refugees. So most of them, let's say that half of them will be in the West Bank and Gaza. And 1 million Palestinians want to return to what is now Israel. But in Israel, they'll be residents, not citizens. So they will not be counted when it comes to national elections. They can live there, they can work there, they can move there, even return to their village. But as citizens of Palestine living, residing in this place. This is mainly in order to respect that demand for a Jewish state. So I accept something that you can have a Jewish state. In the sense only that the majority of the citizens in that state are Jews. But I do not accept the other implications of a Jewish state. So let them have a democratic, liberal state with the majority of the Jews as citizens. It's happening in many countries. There are 500,000 Israelis now who are residents in the US. working good, you know. This is the situation. So if you have 1 million Palestinians with 1.5 million citizens and 1 million residents, still they will have a majority of Jews as a citizen of the state. This much we can respect. And I think it's also can think about something practical, not only academically attractive, but it's also practicable if you have the goodwill and if you want to solve the problem in a humane, compassionate way. The national issue plus the